After the meal, Cyrus walked Cassandra back to her chamber. Do you have everything you require? If there is anything, let me know or tell Lana if I am not around. She will be like your right hand, Cyrus said, throwing the door open to her chamber. Cassandra observed how he had not asked her to reach out to his mother. She simply nodded and took a step inside her space. He followed, and her heartbeat suddenly leapt up. Were they going to share the room? The question erupted in her brain, and her body tensed at the mere thought. Cyrus was in a limbo of his own as he thoughtfully observed the room. His hand swept down his sharp, stubbled jaw, scratching it. It's not as fancy as your previous room, but I will make it worthy for you. Cassandra had moved further in. The nervousness gripped her as she turned to face him. There was so much she wished to ask him, but was afraid of the answers. I like it. I'm not that materialistic anyway, she answered, settling down in the wooden chair and facing Cyrus. He still seemed to be contemplating what he needed to include more in her private chamber. I am aware, but I don't wish for you to feel that you have been lowered in status in any sense. I won't, Cassandra reassured him, feeling affected by his care. Love was something she had always craved, but never received. She was a hopeless romantic, but hid it well under a tough exterior. It was cracking with these tiny bits of care packages he kept throwing in her lap. He hummed deep in his buff chest, still staring at the walls. But I wish to understand what's required of me, and the kind of relationship we have, or will have, she asked with a thudding heart. Cyrus finally turned his attention towards her. His mesmerizing eyes changed colors so fast that Cassandra was left spellbound for a second. The long lashes blinked and kissed the upper edges of his high cheekbones. He remained frozen for a few seconds, staring at his mate with conflicted feelings. There was so much he needed to say to her, too. A hefty amount they should plan together, and yet he was lost on where to begin and how to explain what a sham he was. He would prolong keeping her in the dark as long as he could. It would break him too seeing her broken once the truth came to the surface. He weighed his words wisely before uttering them. We will have a bonding ceremony in a few days, where I will mark you as my Luna. Our souls will conjoin after the marking ritual, and we will be able to feel and understand each other more. The emotions will heighten, even for you. He meaningfully paused, letting his words hit home. Cassandra, who was already affected by him in ways she was still trying to comprehend, wondered how elevated emotions would push them together, and how long before she would lose control and give in to his seductions. She quietly stared back at him, letting him continue. My mother will guide you through the duties later. Listen to her. She may appear stern at times, but her heart is always in the right place. Cyrus took a few steps forward, obscuring her view of every other object, filling it only with his tall and broad figure. He indeed was the king of the desert as she had anticipated during their first meeting, and now she was about to become his queen. This is your home now, Cassandra. These people will soon be your people, and I will ensure they will treat you better than the ones you have left behind. Leaning down, Cyrus held the armrest of her chair with his left hand and brought his face level with Cassandra's. His hand reached out and plucked a lock of her gold-streaked hair, wrapping it around his slender index finger. He brought it to his plump lips and caressed it. The scent of sage and sun-kissed sand invigorated her, and she didn't pull herself back. You will be my Malakti, queen, and the queen of my people. His soft murmurs left her breathless. Literally. She had grown up among mages, but she had never found someone as fascinating and ruthless as this man who called himself her mate. That explains it, but why is your pack like that? I have never heard of such a pack before, Cassandra curiously asked, as Cyrus tucked the twirled lock behind her ear and let out a sigh of frustration. In her heart, she could sense his discontent. The fine lines on his forehead had deepened, and his meaty lips had thinned out as he began to explain. There is a curse on our pack. It has made us this way. We don't know why it was placed on us, but it has been going on for centuries. Concern swept up on Cassandra's face as she watched him with droopy eyes. Her heart skipped a few beats, hearing that there was a curse on them. Can't it be broken? What else does the curse do? Cassandra asked, slightly perturbed. But Cyrus didn't want to scare her more than she already was of him. It was a miracle she didn't flinch when he had just touched her hair. That's a story for another day. You should rest now, Cyrus declared while straightening up. It was already quite a challenge for him to restrain himself in her proximity, and this was only going to grow. Self-restraint was dwindling the more time he spent in her nearness. At times, he wished she was like Stephanie, so he would have a reason to dislike her. But she was so different, so precious, and all he wished was to protect her, to love her, and to mate with her. To have himself buried deep inside her silkiness, jerking away those thoughts and thrusting them deep into a pit where they squirmed, wishing to be let loose. Unwantedly, he took a step back from her, and then another. The ache in his heart intensified. The bond painfully writhed in his chest, propelling to take her in its grasp and splatter her to his chest. To sleep with her, tucked safely in his arms, and yet he knew it would be playing with fire, and the cost was way too high. He watched her from a distance until she had settled in the small bedding he had created for her. Seeing she had laid down and was gazing at him with emotions he didn't want to unfurl, Cyrus blew out the candles and slowly whispered before leaving and slowly closing the door behind him. "Good night, Malakdi, my queen." Cyrus tiredly walked back to his compound with slouched shoulders. She was slowly creeping up into his very existence, and he was letting her. He hadn't anticipated that mate bond would mess with his very thinking abilities, and at times, he would make decisions solely based on his heart. Laying down on a sleeping mat, he placed both his hands under his head and began to contemplate while blankly staring at the ceiling. The wooden door to his compound knocked, and he wondered if it was Ferris coming over for a late drink. But his brother hardly knocked. "Proceed," he permitted in his throaty voice. The door creaked open, and a female stepped in, dressed in very provocative clothes. She swiftly closed the door behind her and tiptoed to where Cyrus lay. His head slowly shifted towards her as his eyes took her in, and he sternly questioned, "Kella? Alpha Baladi, my alpha," she responded respectfully, bowing to him and revealing the cleavage of her ample breasts. They had been shackled in a tight, mesh-styled bandeau with yellow beads hanging from them. They clinked together when she walked on her long tan legs, approaching him like a Lorelei. A tempting smile had curled her heavy lips upwards. "Why are you here?" Cyrus noncommittally asked, his right brow arched as he leaned on his elbow and faced her. She adjusted the bangles on her right arm, letting them clink together. Her long lashes fluttered while she spoke in a soft voice, very different from the one she had used to mock Cassandra. "I am here for you, wearing the bangles you brought for me. I thought you must be tired after being away for so long and would like to unwind." The suggestiveness in her voice was quite transparent, which made him smile. "Kella, come sit here." Cyrus beckoned her forward with the flick of his fingers. She instantly obeyed and planted herself right before his spread-out legs. Her hand reached out to touch them. "Don't," he warned softly but firmly, and she halted in her action, giving him a look of a jilted cat. He remained unmoved. Her scent, which he found bearable before, seemed nauseating now. Not only hers, but every unmated female. The only enticing smell was of his mate. The scent which had seeped into his very bones and mingled with his blood, bonding them together forever. "What we had cannot continue. I have a mate now, and I cannot betray her." His words made her facial features slowly turn into a scowl. If there was anyone else in his position, she would have hissed at him. "A mate who cannot give you what I can," she spoke boldly, remaining indifferent to what he had said. The calmness of Cyrus's face turned sour at her words. He didn't appreciate the answer she had given him. "Do not forget you are speaking to your alpha." She quickly bowed her head in submission, not wanting to rile him up. "My apologies, but I don't want to be cut out of your life. I request to be not deprived of providing you with pleasures and act as your BR. Enough. You may leave, Kayla. Do not enter my chamber again." Cyrus's eyes blazed crimson. The dragon part of him had resurfaced. He was the most possessive one when it came down to Cassandra, and right that moment, this woman was a threat to his mate bond with her. Kella shuffled back in terror from the tone he had used and shielded herself. The dragon was feared by his pack, for he was unpredictable, and Cyrus usually kept him under a tight leash. "Leave," he hissed, and she needn't be told twice. Hauling herself up, she quickly ran out of his chambers, closing the door behind her. Embarrassment scalded her face, and rage made her body shiver. Her alpha had never turned her down before, but the moment he found that wench of a mate, he had forgotten all about her. The moments they had shared, the way he had owned her body, he wouldn't even let her touch him. Where had that caring man disappeared who never said no to her before? Who brought those gifts for her? Had none of that mattered? Knowing he would always have to rely on her, why was he denying her? Wiping away the tears that had leaked out of her black-lined eyes, her feet carried her to Cassandra's chamber. Hatred and jealousy coiled inside her like the serpent she was. Halting just outside, she pulled out a small bottle with a cork from the small pouch that hung on her hip. Pulling it out, she gulped down the green content from it and glared at her door, and then she shifted. Cassandra had gone to sleep in bliss. Cyrus might have been barbaric in his actions, but he wasn't anything but protective of her. He had guarded her with his life on more than one occasion, and she couldn't say the same for any other male in her life. The way he had called her his queen earlier had made her toes curl and her heart flutter. She knew she needed to make the best of her situation and see where it would lead her. Now she slept peacefully. Suddenly her slumber was interrupted by a hissing sound. She opened her eyes to see a green snake standing tall above her. Its scaly skin shone under the low light of the single lantern that hung from the wall. Its forked tongue slipped in and out of its small mouth. Cassandra shrieked in horror and tried to shuffle away from the snake, but it moved at a blinding speed and stuck Cassandra on her bare thigh, transferring its venom into her bloodstream. The pain almost blinded her, as the strong venom spread through her blood system and made her scream out again. Her hand went to her thigh as she clutched it, and tears pooled in her eyes. The snake quickly slithered away and disappeared from under the space of the door before anyone could see it or come to Cassandra's rescue. Cyrus, who was still awake, suddenly felt uneasiness, and then his sharp senses picked up Cassandra's screams of horror. His heart jolted as if an electric bolt had hit him, and like a whirlwind, he was out of the door rushing towards his mate. Cyrus was the first one to reach his mate. He burst through the door, and his bronze chest heaved. His heart almost stopped beating seeing the sight. The mate bond painfully squirmed in his chest, trying to reach her, just to safely nestle her in its hold. Cassandra was clutching her thigh, which was bleeding from 2 points. Her eyes had blown wide from pain and shock. Without thinking, he rushed to her. Before he could physically reach her, his protective powers shot out like blue, wispy tendrils and sounded her in a protective halo, softly glowing all around her. But he knew he was late. He rushed forward and snatched her in his arms while hoarsely inquiring, the sound almost feral. What happened? But her eyes rolled in her sockets as the foam began to froth out of her ajar mouth. He could sense her body going limp in his hold, and the color leaving her cheeks. Panic and guilt gripped his entire being as the smell of a snake's venom hit him, and he understood she had been bitten and poisoned. His gaze traced her arms and hands and landed on her bleeding thigh. "Stay with me. I am here," Cyrus demanded in painful breaths. His head dipped, and his mouth opened. The teeth grazed her thigh as he bit her and began to suck out the poison. Once his mouth was full, he spit it out on the floor. He mind-linked his mother, his beta, his brother, and the pack healer, Founzo, informing him to fetch an antidote to poison. Meanwhile, a few pack members had gathered outside Cassandra's room, the ones who had heard her screams, but none entered without their alpha's permission. An unrest could be observed amongst them as they tried to understand what was happening. Murmurs and gossip began. "Make way. Head to your chambers." Halia's commanding voice and presence had them shuffling away. She had arrived with the healer and her younger son, The door was thrown open once again, and they saw Cyrus sucking out blood from Cassandra's leg. A pool of crimson had formed near them. Cassandra's eyes had closed, and she lay limp in his hold. "Cyrus, let the healer handle it," Halia's calm voice sounded, but it didn't halt her son's action, so she gestured to Ferris to move ahead. "Brother, let the healer take a look." Ferris placed a firm hand on his brother's tensed shoulder. The old healer stayed at a distance for now, seeing and knowing how volatile newly mated mates could get. Cyrus was their alpha. The desires in him were tenfold, and the way he had been made to suppress them. This was not a pretty sight. The brotherly bond did the trick, and Cyrus's senses grappled with reality. He had to let Founso treat her. His bloodied mouth finally stopped, and he lifted his face but didn't let Cassandra go. Halia gestured with a nod of her head, and the healer stumbled forward with a gulp. "Alpha? May I?" He tried to take her from his arms and lay her down on the floor for better inspection. A threatening growl resonated in Cyrus's chest and thundered out. The rage was coursing through him like a poison Cassandra had been bitten with. The world through his eyes was red in that instant. Anyone and everyone appeared as a threat. "She stays in my arms. Treat her." The healer quickly nodded and began to inspect the wound, leaning forward. Ferris and Halia watched in anticipation, but stayed quiet for now. "Seems like a snake bite." "Did you see the snake?" "No, it had slithered away when I arrived." Cyrus snarled in a visceral tone. His eyes, which were changing colors as quickly as the emotions in his chest were whirling. The emotions no one could understand but him. No one spoke unnecessarily, afraid to trigger him. But Halia mind-linked Rannon and Ames, Cyrus's Gamma, to tighten the security and find the damned snake. What frightened her was the possibility that one of their pack members could be behind the attack. They had 5 shifters who possessed snake spirits, along with their regular wolf spirits, 2 women and 3 men. "She is breathing, but it's shallow. We need to give her the antidote." Founso extracted a small glass bottle with a clear moss, green liquid in it. The healer poured the antidote of the most common snake poison into Cassandra's mouth as Cyrus kept it open with his index finger and thumb. Since he wasn't aware of the kind of snake that had bitten her, he used his special mixture, which dealt with most common snakes in Dusartine. Being a desert area, the snakes were very common, and although they avoided biting most of the pack members, they were still a threat to children, and now Cassandra, who was basically human. "It will take effect immediately, but I need to stop the bleeding," the healer told Cyrus in a scared voice. The wise owl spirit inside of him warned him to tread very carefully. It meant touching Cassandra, and he was very afraid of his alpha's reaction. Ferris tightened his hold on his elder brother's shoulder, while tilting his head at the healer to proceed. "Just save her." The words were uttered by Cyrus, embroiled in his pain. He was lost in glumly, staring at her face contorted in pain. His hands gently brushed her unruly hair away. The healer extracted the neem leaves and mixed them with 2 drops of phoenix tears, a fraction of silver powder, and a small piece of a healing crystal. The ingredients he had gathered and bartered from his numerous travels all around the different continents, quickly making a paste using a wooden mortar and pestle. He scooped it up on his index finger and applied it to the wound in abundance. Taking out a fresh pair of bandages, he finally tied it around Cassandra's thigh so the healing mixture he had applied would take its effect without getting removed. Only when the healer had completed his job and shifted 2 steps back to stand behind Halia did Ferris let go of his brother's shoulder. "Leave us!" Cyrus's order rang out in the form of a command that wrung their ears. "She is tough. She will be all right," Ferris whispered and patted his brother's thick shoulder before leaving after Founso. Halia lingered for a few seconds, concerned about the situation, but knew he wouldn't listen to her in such a condition. His mind was fixated on his mate, for the pheromones it was producing made him incapacitated for anything else. Slowly she walked out, too, and closed the door behind her. Ordering their best warriors, she stationed them outside Cassandra's room. Ames was personally present to oversee that no one would enter the room. They had failed to protect her on her very first night with them, and she personally took that failure upon herself. No more blunders. Cassandra was vital for them and the survival of their pack. The night was excruciatingly long. The wind howled outside, stirring up small sandstorms. But all Sirus could dwell into and feel was his mate. She was in a healing sleep now, lying comfortably in his strong arms. His blue halo completely surrounded her, as if he didn't wish for anyone to even approach her. The tips of his rough knuckles slowly rubbed her pink cheek. The skin so soft, unlike his. Never for a second his desperate gaze did waver from her. The dips and ridges of her neck were crafted with perfection, as if gods had all the time in the world to carve her with perfection. The Cupid-shaped lips curled just the right amount, and his mind wondered how they would taste like when she would finally let him caress them. Soft as those dew-kissed petals of a morning flower, he had been bestowed with a gem, and he failed in protecting her, in keeping the promise he made to her. The burdens of his heart got heavier as the darkness of the night slowly abated to be replaced by the first rays of the dawn, and yet she didn't stir. The tranquility and serenity on her face were priceless. This connection which he sensed with her went way beyond the few days he had known her. He didn't quite understand the complexities this new relationship held. All he felt was being responsible for her, for he had claimed her in front of her kingdom. She was his responsibility now. "Forgive me for being so negligent in my duties," he whispered guiltily. The beast spirits inside of him paced restlessly. They wanted the culprit dead. What baffled Sirus was no detection of scent on his entry to her room, except hers. If one of his pack members had entered the room as a snake and bitten her, he would have detected the scent. He would handle this matter once she woke up. For now, all he wished was to stare at her ethereal beauty for an eternity. For those rich amethyst-shaded eyes to flutter open and stare back at him. For her to bicker with him and call him barbarian. Deep down he loved it whenever she called him that. The slow rise and fall of her chest kept his breath going. The very beats of her heart were like a beacon of light on a lighthouse, guiding him home amidst a wrecking storm that was his own heart. That elusive fragrance which oozed out of her pores faintly soothed his emotional burdens, and he couldn't help but take deep breaths. He gently rubbed her arm. The velvety softness felt so good against the hard calluses of his fingertips. She wore no jewelry, unlike her sisters whom he had seen laden with them. A silent reminder he made to get her the most luxurious of them. She would be his queen, and he would bring her the finest of the finest adornments. He knew he should lay her down on her bedding, but he couldn't bring himself to let her go from his arms and sever the connection. As the first rays of the rising sun entered through the mesh-covered hole near the ceiling, Cassandra finally stirred in his hold. The new day brought glad tidings, and she slowly opened her eyes. Her glossy gaze fell on his worriedly handsome face as his fleshy lips stretched, and he tried to smile. "Hey, princess." Cassandra let her brain acclimatize with her surroundings and understand what had occurred. The bits and pieces of what had transpired came back to her. Like a jerk reaction, her body propelled forward and she tried to sit up. "Easy. Keep lying down. You were poisoned." His hand gently pushed her back so her head would rest on his thick bicep again. "I thought I was going to die," she professed, her cheeks shading the color of rose as she realized where she had been lying. She was in his arms, sleeping in his lap. "That can't happen on my watch. We gave you the antidote. The healer said you will wake up in a few hours." He tenderly informed her as both of their eyes flickered towards her wound. Sirus's hand gently touched the side of her thigh, making her skin dance with those delicious sparks. "Does it pain?" Sirus slowly asked as his fingers crawled above her bandage and further pulled up her flimsy nightdress, revealing more and more smooth skin to his starved eyes. There was no pain. The potion seemed to have done its trick, but there certainly was an itch growing inside of her. The itch for his palm to join his wandering fingers on her upper limb. "I don't feel any discomfort," Cassandra heavily breathed out, trying to keep her emotions buried deep down, but he had a knack for plucking them out and starkly displaying them. "Good, or I would kiss away every speck of pain that would remain." "Tell me what the snake looked like," he asked in such a casual tone while his fingers and eyes remained on her naked flesh. "Green, and angry. It hissed at me before biting me and scurrying away. Cassandra recalled, and a shudder went through her at the horrible memory. Cyrus quickly clutched the inner part of her smooth thigh, while his arm securely wrapped around her head. Don't worry. Once I find it, that will be the last moment it will breathe. I will bury it with that audacity to hurt what's mine. You are mine. His voice was embroiled in frostiness so deep that it sent shivers through Cassandra's body. She had seen his ruthlessness firsthand, and now it was going to unleash on a mere snake. But then the idea of that snake being human erupted in Cassandra's brain, and her heart jolted with deep worries, the ones she didn't wish to explore. No, it couldn't be. But he had already deciphered what she was merely thinking. The tip of his index finger's nail traced her inner thigh as he spoke in a hushed but bone-chilling tone, as if ruthless was his second name, even if it's a member of my pack. His crimson eyes wavered to her, holding her hypnotized. Cassandra wasn't sure she could digest more bloodshed, especially one done in her name. Let it go. I'm sure it was just a snake. I feel better now, Cassandra requested, trying to squirm away from his hold. But Cyrus had other plans. He mind-linked Renan, his eyes blinking rapidly as he passed him orders. Once he was done, he focused on Cassandra. We get to the bottom of this. Right this instant. Renan is bringing all the snake shifters. They will shift right before your eyes, and you will identify if any of them was the snake who bit you, Cyrus firmly informed her, giving her no option to resist. A low knock was heard on the door, and Cassandra jumped up, trying to get out of his lap. Cyrus completely turned his body and pressed his back against the wall, taking Cassandra with him. Both of them now faced the door with her snugly perched up in his lap. His tanned legs slithered up on hers while his arm rested on her waist, caging her between his chest and bicep, giving her no space to move. Stay, he whispered on the outer edge of her ear, his lips almost grazing her skin. She swallowed, nipping the urge to turn and sneak a look at his face. What will everyone think? She apprehensively asked, being raised with norms to stay chaste and not be touched by the opposite gender before a legal relationship still shackled her. You are my mate. As their alpha, it would serve as an example for them. Her mouth had completely dried. She hadn't drunk any water, and now this man's heat was seeping into her. Enter, he ordered in his guttural voice, sending quivers tumbling through her body. The door creaked as it slowly opened, and Renan entered first, with deep concern lining his face. One look at the couple in front, and his facial expressions eased. Cassandra went pink in embarrassment. Cyrus's gaze held questions for Renan. Alpha, Nisa, he bowed respectfully. I have brought them. Bring them in. The authority in his voice rang so clear that Renan felt it bleed into his bones, and he couldn't raise his head for a second. The aura that leaked out turned the air gloomy and suffocating as Renan ordered them to enter. 3 men and 2 women who wore no shoes entered one by one with their hands clasped and heads lowered. No one dared speak as Cyrus didn't rein in his aura. Cassandra noticed that one of the women was Kella. She kept her head low, though not glancing once in Cassandra's direction. Did any of you shift last night and enter my mate's room? Cyrus asked, letting his dark aura burst out. It moved like these invisible, dismal waves that seeped into their hearts and inundated them with unfathomable fear, bringing them to their knees. Their bodies shook and lips quivered. Speak, he thundered, and even Cassandra felt his rage deep into her marrow. No, Alpha, I didn't, one of the men spoke in a quivering voice. His lips trembled and his knees shook in fear. The others followed his pursuit, and no one admitted to the allegation. Shift, all of you in your snake forms. The next order surged in, weighing them down in its heaviness. Cassandra uncomfortably shifted in his hold, but it didn't deter him, nor did it slacken his grip on her. Kella finally flickered her eyes towards Cyrus and found his scrutinizing gaze fixated on her as if in a challenge. Seeing his brawny arms wrapped around this sick-looking woman, he called her maid and turned her insides. She wasn't worthy of their alpha with a skin so pale as if she possessed no blood. Kela was the first one to shift into an enormous red snake with smooth scales and orange lines on her belly area. Just like Kela, the snake held a natural charm and mesmerizing beauty. She reared her upper body and bowed to her alpha, trying to act respectfully. "Was this the snake who bit you?" Cyrus asked, although he knew Cassandra had said it was green earlier. Although the color was different, Cassandra couldn't shake the feeling that those eyes were the same which had venomously stared at her last night. She had no way to prove it, and no way she wished to let someone get killed based on a hunch. Living with Stephanie had been a very similar experience. She often put Cassandra through physical and emotional torture. "No, it was green." Cassandra shook her head, and Cyrus dismissed her with a wave of his hand. The next 4 members transformed one by one as well, but they were all different colors. There was one green snake amongst them, but it was a lighter shade and much larger in size. Cassandra and the 5-pack members heaved sighs of relief, but Cyrus couldn't help but grunt in annoyance. Once they had been dismissed, and only Renon remained behind, Cyrus began. "I want 2 permanent guards outside this room at all times. Tell Ames to personally oversee it, and I want that snake captured. How did a random animal slither inside our home without anyone's notice? It will be done." "Should I arrange for breakfast?" Renan asked, taking mental notes of how possessive their alpha was acting and sharing it with Ferris. They never thought such a day would ever come. "Yes, we will have breakfast here today. Ask Lana to prepare something special for us, and send Healer Founso. I need him to have a look at my mate." Ranon bowed once again and exited their room, closing the door quietly behind him. As the door shut, Cyrus placed his pointed finger under Cassandra's chin and slowly turned it so she would face him. Once she made eye contact, Cyrus inquired, "Did you tell the truth? Or were you trying to act as a saint again and spare someone who almost took your life?" His questions were wrapped in steely edges that ebbed at her tender heart. She tried to steal her gaze away, but he tightened his hold on her chin. "I was telling the truth, and killing is not always the solution. Kindness and love can conquer hearts like nothing else can. Not everyone deserves love and kindness, especially not from someone so pure as you are. Don't worry, you will learn along with much else I need to teach you." His voice had deepened, getting huskier as the upper part of his thumb slowly rubbed her lower lip, causing sparks to dance naked there. A moan threatened to fall from her slightly parted lips. Cyrus's eyes slithered down to them, and he wished to touch them. His thumb slowly rubbed the lower one. "Will she stop us if we were to claim them at this very moment? They seem very soft and velvety." "I like soft and velvety." The dragon purred inside him as if he was a cat and not a majestic creature pinning for his mate.